Hello, I'm Tina Sauser, and I am a technology integrationist at ESU 8. Today I'm going to talk to you about ability grouping and tracking students. So first, I think it's important to define the ability grouping versus the tracking and its vocabulary. So first, the two terms are generally used interchangeably, but the definition of each actually highlight a few differences. Tracking generally is used more at the middle school and high school levels, and it's where students are segregated into different classrooms based upon their academic ability or different sections of courses based on their academic ability. And it's offering them courses based on their prior learning and performance. For example, a student who is outstanding in math may take an honors math class, whereas a student who struggles with math will take a remedial math course. Now, ability grouping, on the other hand, is primarily used at the elementary levels, and that's where they actually group students together based on their abilities to perform within the certain subject areas. So they're placed into groups with students at a similar level of understanding based on the content area as well. My first experience with this personally was in elementary school. For reading, we were ability grouped, and I recall some of the names being like Bluebird Group and Redbird Group, and I also recall thinking, I did understand at that point that it had to do with how well we did or how well we performed in reading, but I also don't recall any feelings of being feeling like I was less capable of doing things than others, or feeling angry that I wasn't in the top group, or any of those sort of feelings. I just continued to read at that level, and I remember it being a very structured time when we actually got to spend one-to-one time with the teacher, and our teacher was able to really focus in on some skills that we probably needed more than, say, some of the other groups. Another experience I've had with ability grouping itself was as a teacher. One of the school districts I was in did ability grouping in reading, and we actually had students who traveled from our classes to different classes, and ones that came into our classes. And I remember really enjoying my time that I got to spend with the groups of students, because as a teacher, I could really focus in on the needs of that small group of students and build their knowledge based on where they were at, and where I wanted them to go as a group. And I remember really enjoying that entire year that I spent building those practices with the groups of students. And I don't feel, again, that any of them ever really thought that they were good or bad readers, just that they had different books, because every one of the groups had different books to read based on their group's ability levels, but that was more known to the teachers rather than the students. So when asked if I am a proponent of ability grouping or tracking, I would have to say yes, but only if it's used correctly. And I can't speak as much to tracking because I don't have direct personal experience with that. I see the limitations of tracking as far as a lot of the way schools do it is that the student does get lost in that same track, and it's hard for them to excel beyond that one track. But with ability grouping, I kind of think of ability grouping being more like differentiating, and the ability to meet students where they are and spend time with students based on their needs and their the base knowledge that they come into the situation with, I think is essential. But I don't think that you have to necessarily group them in the way that we used to do it. I think technology now offers a lot of opportunity for us to ability group our students and differentiate our instruction without actually physically moving them into groups and putting them into groups, and maybe causing some of those feelings of um, helplessness or inadequacy. But I think technology allows us to differentiate our learning enough and easy enough that our struggling students we can reach through different technology opportunities. And I also think that ability grouping our students allows teachers the time to spend with students in a more structured setting as well as within smaller groups. Um, struggling students require more time and consideration and will need more support from the teacher than, say, higher functioning groups. That's not to say that higher functioning groups don't need the teacher's support and need the teacher's direction, but it's it looks different for those students than it does the struggling students. Um, so I think teachers need to be careful not to limit students to a group in which they begin. So if you do ability group students, I think there has to be a continual evaluation and assessment of those students to see um, where they're moving, how they're moving forward, and what you can do to keep them excelling. Um, from a student perspective, the students will be grouped with people who are at the same level as they are, and so for them to bounce ideas off of those students so that they don't get frustrated because they're not understanding what they're talking about, or they don't feel like they have to teach those other kids because they're at a higher level. I think that's great for those students. So none of none of this none of the issues that have been discussed in some of these articles is I see as a problem today, especially again, as I stated earlier, with the use of technology. There's some great tools, for instance, the different learning management systems like Canvas and Schoology and even Google Classroom, even though it's not a full-blown LMS, can offer tools to teachers to allow for differentiated instruction where they can kind of in some ways ability group the students based on the assignments and resources that they send out. There's also ways that you can modify some of the resources. For example, there's a tool called Newsella, which allows you to choose news articles about specific topics, and you can, through Newsella, you can actually choose different lexiles of the same lexile reading levels of the same article, but it still has the important content and the main ideas in all the lexile levels. And so you could share those out to your different groups or your different ability groups based on where the students are. There's also tools such as BlendSpace that allow a teacher to create a lesson flow for different students, and so you could create a lesson flow that can meet the needs of your lower functioning students as well as your higher functioning students, and it's very easy to do. So I guess in reality, I think technology allows us to offer students their own time, path, and pace of lessons, which, if any of you have heard those terms before, it has to do with blended learning, which is also a way to kind of differentiate instruction and to address those different ability groups. I think the most important point to make here is that it is an district staff's job to meet the needs of every student within their building, and I think that we have to meet the needs of not only the struggling learners, the middle level learners, but the high level learners as well. And sometimes that's hard to do when they're all grouped into one classroom, but I think again, as I mentioned, technology can be your best friend in that respect because it allows sometimes an extra hand to facilitate some of those um, different levels of thinking and knowledge. And I think that students that can work where they are can build their knowledge base quicker and faster when they can work with people with it at that same level. And so I think again, it's the school's job to educate all students to their best ability. And I think ability grouping and differentiating for students is the key to that. Thanks for listening.